Hello, I'm Tony Collins and this is the Rugby Reloaded podcast. This week I wanted to look at the history of what was once called the short form versions of rugby, sevens and nines. Over the past decade or so, these cut down variations of the game have become very important, with the expansion of nines in rugby league, but especially in rugby union, where the inclusion of the seven-a-side game in the Olympics has given the sport a much enhanced international profile. To some extent, this newfound popularity of what we might call limited player rugby has been inspired by the success of 2020 cricket. Sports administrators tend to be herd animals, so if one sport discovers a successful formula, it doesn't take long for a bandwagon to start rolling. Even Aussie Rules tried to get in on the act this year with its seven-a-side AFL-X. Rugby has a much longer history of what might be termed limited player innovations, going back almost 140 years. If you read any histories of short form rugby, you will have been told that it was invented in Melrose, in Scotland's border region, in 1883. But, as is usual in rugby history, this isn't quite the full story. So let's rewind slightly. Rugby in Scotland emerged in the elite private schools of Edinburgh in the 1850s and 1860s. But by the mid-1870s, the game had also become popular in the small industrial towns of the borders, where woolen cloth was its most important product. Galashiels specialised in tweed, Hawick in hosiery and knitwear, and Melrose in linen, ensuring that a local rivalry would fuel the emergence of rugby clubs. Hawick Rugby Club was formed in 1873, followed by Gala in 1875, Kelso the following year, and Melrose the year after. Rugby in the Borders was passionate and intense, a game for all the classes that brought together the local businessman with the factory hand, just as it did in the north of England and South Wales. It had a popular culture that was a world away from the elite atmosphere of Edinburgh's patrician rugby clubs. Indeed, these two worlds rarely met. No Borders player was selected for Scotland before Galashiels' Adam Dalgleish made his debut in the Scottish pack against Wales in 1890. And one major difference between the clubs in Edinburgh and the Borders was in the region's love of seven-a-side rugby. The first Sevens tournament was staged by Melrose in April 1883, apparently suggested by local butcher and rugby player Ned Haig as a way of raising money for the club. The first seven-a-side competition took place on the 28th of April 1883 as part of a range of attractions at the Melrose Sports Carnival. The appeal of seven-a-side rugby was sealed by Melrose's defeat of its deadly rival Gala in the final, ensuring that enough enthusiasm and desire for revenge would make the tournament an annual affair. But this wasn't the first time that a shortened version of rugby had been played. The towns of the Scottish borders had much in common with their fellow rugby-playing textile towns in the north of England, not least an enthusiasm for sports festivals where the best local talent could be showcased. In fact, it appears that the first type of short-form rugby began with a six-a-side tournament in September 1879, organised by Huddersfield Cricket and Athletic Club, today's Huddersfield Giants. As well as Huddersfield, Leeds, Dewsbury, Bradford, Leeds St John's, who are today's Rhinos, Bradford Juniors and Kirkstall entered for the chance to win 6 small silver cups, with 6 leather bags for the runners-up. Playing under regular rugby rules in 10-minute halves, Huddersfield 6 overran Leeds 23-0 in the final. Over the next 3 or 4 years, Dewsbury, Bramley, Cleckheaton, Wakefield and Leeds Parish Church all organised similar contests. 6-a-sides were played during the summer, usually at athletic carnivals, with the aim of raising money for the club or more often for local hospital charities. But by the mid-1880s, the popularity of 6-a-sides had been eclipsed by the 9-a-side form of the game. In August 1881, Batley staged the first 9-a-side tournament. 7 clubs entered, competing for a first prize of 9 Vienna regulators, a type of pendulum wall clock, which were valued at £2 10 shillings each, roughly the equivalent of the weekly wage of a skilled labourer. The runners-up each received a gentleman's travelling bag. It was not accidental that the value of prizes was always publicised, ensuring that players understood that they were playing for something a little bit more tangible than just glory. Batley were defeated by their neighbours Dewsbury in the final, but the match ended in uproar, as Batley historian C.F. Shaw described in his 1899 book The Gallant Youths. The Batley men declared that 3 clear points had to be obtained before a win could be claimed. This view was stoutly opposed by Dewsbury, and when the referee, a Mr. Bentley of Heckmondwike, was appealed to, he waived his decision, which so exasperated a certain section of the crowd that a free fight ensued. The referee was expected to attend a meeting of the Batley Committee but failed to make his appearance, as he had received several threatening letters in regard to the contest, and the committee therefore decided to submit the matter to the editor of the Athletic News and abide by his decision, which was given in favour of Dewsbury. Batley became the centre of summer nines competitions. In 1883, 3,000 people gathered at Batley Town Hall to see them receive the silver trophy from the mayor. The fact that their opponents in the final were Barrow, who had travelled over 100 miles to be there, showed the appeal of the short form of the game to fans and clubs alike. Nine-a-side tournaments were staged throughout the 1880s in Yorkshire and also in Lancashire, attracting large crowds and raising thousands of pounds for local charities. So why did limited player rugby die out? As you might guess, the leadership of the Rugby Football Union were not keen on these short-form contests. This was due to two reasons. Most tournaments were played outside of the regular season using modified rules, thus undermining the official leadership's control of the game. For example, the 1881 Batley tournament was played under its own point-scoring system. A converted try was worth 8 points, a goal was 6 points, and an unconverted try 4. But at this time, official rugby union rules only counted goals as a method of scoring. The second problem for the authorities was that the limited player contests were suspected of promoting professionalism. The prizes were often valuable, and it was well known that players could simply sell the clocks and medals that they won for their cash value. And some tournaments even offered cash prizes, strictly against the RFU's rules. Wakefield's 1882 six-a-side contest saw the winning Thorns players pick up £2 each. So, in August 1890, the Yorkshire Rugby Union suspended 8 teams for playing in a summer six-a-side tournament. The following month, the Lancashire Rugby Union banned matches that had less than 15 players on each side. A Lancashire Rugby Union commented that feelings ran very strongly against the nine-a-side game during the close season, and it was decided that in future no more contests should be allowed during the summer. This marked the end of the line for sixes and nines in England, early victims of the convulsions in rugby that would be caused by the RFU's campaign for pure amateurism. But in Scotland, the two worlds of rugby lived in separate spheres that rarely connected. Border rugby presented no threat to the patrician leadership of the game, and the seven-a-side version was allowed to continue unhindered. And, thanks to some judicious historical editing, the limited player game was eventually incorporated into the mainstream culture of rugby union, most notably with the start of the Middlesex Sevens in 1926 by the exiled Scotsman Dr. J. A. Russell Cargill. Sevens and nines never really occupied the same important position in rugby league culture. The reason why sevens became very important to rugby union was because it moved away from the set piece and the importance of goal kicking in 15-a-side rugby to shift the emphasis to running with the ball, passing and scoring tries. But these were the very principles on which rugby league based its own philosophy of the game. So, in short, rugby union needed limited player rugby to remind it of a different way to play the game. But rugby league was already that different game. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Rugby Reloaded podcast. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my name is @CollinsTony, and if you want to dig a bit deeper into the history of rugby and the other football codes, take a look at the Rugby Reloaded website at www.rugbyreloaded.com, where you will now find an exclusive in-depth preview of my new book, How Football Began, A Global History of How the World's Football Codes Were Born. Until next week, thanks for listening.